Hello, and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about why there are times and places where we do not need more spirituality, we do not need more self help, we do not need more personal growth, we do not need more self improvement, and rather we need some other things, which I am going to talk about in this video. And why the kind of health, wellness, spirituality world has tricked us in a lot of ways into thinking that there is a reality that is available to us that isn't actually available to us. And it has tricked us into believing that the way to happiness is something other than what it actually is. And I really want to explore this today because again, right? I work with this stuff all day every day. I have my mystery school, I have my one-on-one coaching, and I see the kind of long-ranging, long-term effects of a lot of what is taught in spirituality, self-help, and personal growth. And I see the ways in which it's benefiting people, and I see the ways in which it's actually causing more harm. And I feel like it's really important that we talk about the places and the spaces where the information that we might be getting is actually causing more harm than it is good. Because, again, so many people are working from information that is holding them back from actually feeling how they want to feel in life. Okay? So, this is what we're going to be talking about today: the times and places where spirituality, self help, personal growth is actually making things worse, where the ideas that they are giving us are sending us in the wrong direction, and how we can learn to discern when spirituality, self help, personal growth work is actually truly beneficial for us, and when it is something that is going to cause us to feel worse rather than better. Okay? So, again, just a quick little ad from our sponsor today, which is always my mystery school. I have my 5-year self-study program, which is all about, like I say, just kind of, I've created as much as I can a super detailed map of what it means to learn to love yourself and to come out of our shame, blame, and guilt stories so that we can connect with our true selves, we can connect with how we're actually feeling, and through that, we can figure out what we actually need in life and what we actually want and what's actually going to make us feel good. Because that is usually why we are doing all of this self-love, self-help, self-improvement work, right? Like at the end of the day, we just want to feel good. We want to live lives that feel meaningful to us, that feel purposeful to us, that make us feel like we have some power and autonomy. And the self-love path is all about giving you the tools to be able to do that. So that's what I have to offer. If you are looking for more resources or guide or help for any of the things that you're going through, that's what I have to offer. So go check that out and let's get into the video. Okay. So the main thing that I sort of see in the self-help, spirituality, personal growth world is this idea that if we fix ourselves enough, if we do enough spiritual work, self-help work, self-improvement work, we can get to a place where we always feel good and we never have a negative emotion and we never have a negative experience, and everything that we want we can create in our lives, and we can get rid of anything that we don't. And there is kind of almost this underlying message that if you're really doing your self-help, personal growth, spirituality work correctly, that you will have no more suffering in your life. And that if you are suffering, or if you haven't been able to create the life that you want to create, if you still have negative emotions, or if you have any kind of like triggers or past trauma or anything going on that's not pure transcendence, that you're doing it wrong, or that you're missing something, or that you're not living life how you should be living it. And this message is at once really, really intoxicatingly attractive, right? Who does not want to believe that we can do enough internal personal work to get to a place where we never suffer or struggle or have a negative thought or a negative feeling or a negative experience ever again? Who doesn't want to believe that if we just control ourselves enough, if we just control ourselves enough, if we improve ourselves enough, if we change our mindset enough, if we become positive enough, that we can then get to a place where we're never triggered again, where we're always in our most enlightened state, where we never have a negative emotion, we never have a negative reaction, and we can, like I say, create everything we want to create in our lives. We want to believe this. And the self-help, spirituality, and personal growth world is all about selling us this message that this kind of perfected, transcended life is possible. And that, again, it's going to come through controlling ourselves, right? Through making sure that we get our mindset right, that we take personal responsibility enough, that we are doing all of our spiritual work and all of our internal self-help work, and this is how we're going to get a life that never feels bad. So then when we struggle, when we come up against negative emotions, when we come up against experiences that don't feel good, when we encounter times and places where we're triggered, or we're overwhelmed, or we're overstimulated, or we're noticing that we're just in our patterns and our loops and doing our same things over and over and over again, we reach for our spiritual tools, we reach for our self-help, we reach for our self-improvement. And we look for, okay, what am I doing wrong? How am I failing? How am I not seeing it for how it really is? How am I doing things the wrong way to cause me my pain and my suffering? And how can I fix myself so that I will feel better? And oftentimes, again, it's not even that we are doing this to ourselves consciously, but rather all the messages in spirituality, self-help, and personal growth, so many of them anyways, come from that root of if you are in pain and if you are suffering and if anything bad is happening to you and if you have any habits or any ways of being that are not serving you or whatever, that you need to fix yourself. You need to change yourself. That the bottom line root issue is always that there's something wrong with you. That if you fix it or change it, you will then step into a life of pure bliss. And it's very rarely communicated like that. Okay? You're pretty much never going to go into your Instagram feed or read your book or whatever it is that you're doing to find your self-help, spirituality, and personal growth materials and have someone say to you straight up, it's your fault that you're suffering. It's your fault that you're suffering, right? It's your fault that you have a negative emotion. It's your fault that you have a trigger. It's your fault that you're doing this, and you need to fix yourself so that you can feel better. It's never going to be stated like that. It's pretty much never going to be stated like that. Some people do. Like, there are definitely some teachers out there who are, tough love, and they say it pretty much straight up like that. But most of the time, it's rather going to be stated more in a way that makes it feel and sound incredibly empowering, right? Most of the self-help, spirituality, personal growth work that we are attracted to is going to be framed in a way where it's saying, you have the power to create your perfect life. You have the power to heal yourself. You have the power to change whatever negative thing you're experiencing and to create this perfect life that you want. If you are willing to take enough personal responsibility, if you are willing to do the spiritual work, if you're willing to go on the spiritual journey, you, as this all-powerful being who's so incredibly amazing and perfect and special because you found this work and you are different and you are set aside and you are more enlightened than everyone else because you found this special spiritual path or this personal growth work or whatever, and you're willing to take responsibility for yourself, or you're willing to change your mindset, or whatever it is, and therefore you are going to be able to create this perfect, beautiful life where you've transcended all of your problems and you never have a negative emotion ever again. And that is because you have the power, right? That's usually how it's framed. If we're thinking about the spirituality, personal growth, self-help stuff that we tend to be sold, that's usually how it's framed, right? And what I want you to start to recognize, and I want you to start to point out as we go deeper on this self-love path, and as we become the kind of people who can objectively observe what we're being sold and what we're being taught, so that we can pick out the things that are truly beneficial, while also being able to recognize that not everything that we're being sold is true, and not everything that we're being sold is actually beneficial. I want you to first just really recognize why that message of you taking control means that you can have the perfect life is so intoxicating, and why it makes us feel so buzzy and connected, and like we found our answer, and like we found the truth, and if we just do this right, we can accomplish the perfect life. Number one, because of course, who does not want to hear that we can get out of pain, that we can have a perfect experience, and all we have to do is fix and change ourselves, right? Like that boils down reality and simplifies reality so much that it's going to make us feel like in this world where we actually live in a very complex, complicated, multifactorial, multifaceted reality, where we can feel like we don't have to worry about all these forces and things that are happening that we have no control over, where we don't have to consider that there might be things that we don't have control over, where we don't have to take into account that we are existing within systems that we did not create, that we are existing in bodies that we did not choose, that we come from histories that have affected us in ways that we may not have chosen for ourselves, obviously, that have had profound impacts on the ways that we think and that we feel and the things that we experience and the things that we have access to. That we don't have to think about any of that complicating factor, any of those complicating factors, because we are being told that all that matters is fixing and changing your mindset or your behavior in some way. And that these are the two keys that will then create your perfect life. That is incredibly attractive. That idea, when we are living in this world that is full of all of these complicating factors, to think, I don't have to take any of those complicating factors into account when I'm thinking about what I'm experiencing. That if I can just fix and change and perfect myself, I can fix and change and perfect my life. That's incredibly attractive, right? So I want you to just start to notice, where are you getting the message that happiness and fulfillment and success and feeling how we want to feel and experiencing what we want to experience comes down to all you have to do is perfect yourself. All you have to do is find the right spiritual practice, or take enough responsibility for yourself, or find the right diet, or find the right mindset, or whatever it is. And once you do that, you will have the perfect life and you will never suffer again. And I just want you to notice why that would be attractive to you, if it is. Okay, so there's that element of it. It simplifies reality. It's incredibly attractive in the self-help, spirituality, personal growth world to believe that we have complete control. If we just control our own minds and control our own bodies and control our own choices. Because it simplifies everything. Second thing, it completely feeds into the childhood programming that we got in the first several years of our lives, before our logical mind was even online. We were learning experientially. Okay? I really want you to, again, this is work we do in the mystery school, and this is work I do in my one-on-one coaching so much, because this is such an important concept to grasp, and so few people are able to connect the dots between what they're experiencing now and how they're perceiving life and what's going on with them and what they experienced growing up. And so many of us are living these lives where we just think we arrived in adulthood, we just started making bad choices and having coping mechanisms and self-sabotage, and that's the reason that we're suffering. And we just have these things for no reason. And that if we could just get rid of these things, we would fix our lives. Because that's what self-help and spirituality and personal growth tells us. You are an adult who just came into adulthood, decided to fuck up your own life, and now you need to unfuck it up by making better choices and having a better perspective, and that will heal everything. And again, the reason this is so attractive to us, and the reason that it makes so much sense to us, is because, again, in our formative years of life, our first experience of what it is to be alive, to be a human, was to have an experience where we did not understand how anything functioned. We did not have any autonomy. We did not have the capacity to make choices for ourselves that would affect our reality. We didn't have the ability to understand what we needed, how to get our needs met, what it was that we needed to do to help ourselves. We did not have the capacity to understand that our caregivers were human, that they were imperfect, and that they were indoctrinating us with a way of life that probably had some really great parts to it and had some really not great parts to it. All we knew was that our caregivers, the people who were controlling us, right? The people who were giving us everything that we needed, were completely in control. We saw them as God. That was our experience. And what we learned through that experience in our bodies was that they were reacting and responding to us based on our behavior. Because our behavior and our responses and our reactions were the one thing we had any autonomy over. So when our caregivers loved us, paid attention to us, nourished us, and nurtured us. We were perceiving that we were doing the right things in order to get our needs met, that we were exhibiting the correct behaviors. When our caregivers were not able to or didn't meet our needs, if we did not feel that safe, secure, loving connection, if we did not feel like our caregivers, no matter how we behaved and no matter what we did, were going to be there for us, that's what secure connection means. Love no matter what. If we did not feel that, we did not feel safe. Because again, from our perspective, being loved by our caregivers directly equaled being provided for, having our needs met, being safe. Being rejected, abandoned, shamed, abused, harmed by our caregivers, these people we were completely dependent upon for absolutely everything, translated to us as I am doing something wrong. I am failing, I am bad, I am wrong, I am shameful. Because that was the only way we could make sense of our caregivers not caring for us. We could not, in our childhood state, understand that caregivers could be incapable, that caregivers could be wrong, abusive, harmful, that the ways that they were treating us could have nothing to do with our behavior, could be completely inappropriate, could be all of these things that harm us and made us feel unsafe and left us with our needs not being met, that had nothing to do with us. We weren't able to perceive that. We learned that there was just a one-to-one. If I'm not getting my needs met and caregivers aren't taking care of me and I'm being hurt and I'm being harmed and I don't feel good, this means that I'm doing something wrong. And I have to change, fix, alter myself, my behavior, my way of being, to try to elicit a different response. Now, again, this conditioning is going to be based on degree for all of us. We don't all have this to the same degree because some of our caregivers were able to validate us. Some of our caregivers were able to love us and make us feel safe no matter how we were reacting and responding. Some of us had situations where our caregivers were really able to be there for us. And so we learned that it was okay for us to be how we are and to experience what we were experiencing and to express how we were expressing. And that secure connection was there. And then we grew up having more of a capacity to understand how real reality works and to be ourselves and to pursue the things that matter to us and to do all of these things and to have a broader view of reality and usually then have a easier chance at having, balanced relationships and connection to our bodies and all of these awesome things because we had a secure connection. For some of us who did not have a secure connection, where our caregivers were overwhelmed or in poverty or sick or just literally not able to care for us in some way, all of that would have translated to us as I'm not safe, I'm not secure, I'm not okay. And the one thing I have control over is my behavior. So I'm going to try to figure out what I am doing that's causing my caregivers to not care for me. And this is how we develop shame, guilt, and blame, hating parts of ourselves, coping mechanisms, ways that we numb, ways that we stimulate ourselves. Because we were trying to figure out, what do I need to do to feel good? And we were trying to change the one thing we had any power over, which was ourselves and our own behavior. You see? So we learn that deep in our bodies. We learn that deep in our nervous systems before our intellect is even online. We learn one-to-one relationship. I get my needs met and I find safety through doing X, Y, and Z behaviors. When I do this, this, and that, caregivers pull away or abuse me or do whatever. And that is what's bad and wrong and shameful about me. And I have to stop that. So all of our coping mechanisms, all of our bad parts, all of our ways of being that we have in our adulthoods, that we think are the things that are wrong with us, are really the behaviors we learned we had to do to be safe in the conditions we were in our childhoods, or in our early adulthoods, or right in school when we were being bullied by friends, or any of these things. We would have learned somewhere along the way, right? That fitting in and being loved and being approved of was how we got our needs met and how we were safe. So we would have learned, what do I need to do? What are the behaviors that get me rejected? What are the behaviors that get me loved? And then how do I suppress and deny any part of myself that doesn't align with that, with what I think I need to do and be to get approval from my caregivers? So then spirituality, self-help, and personal growth come in, and they feed directly on that childhood perspective. You can have the perfect life. You can have the perfect experience if you just control the one thing you have control over: yourself, your behavior, the way that you're thinking. Right? And again, so much of the time, the things that we correlated with, these are the bad things about me, that is what we perceived was the reason our caregivers were pulling away from us, or the reason our caregivers weren't caring for us. That's how we learned, I can't be this way, I can't do this behavior. Because from our perception, that was the reason caregivers weren't caring for us. Whether that was actually true or not, because in a lot of situations it wasn't actually true. That wasn't the reason our caregivers were doing what they were doing or not, but we were finding patterns whether they existed or not. So you see, this becomes very complicated. This is why, again, the mystery school is 5 years long, because learning to disentangle the shame, blame, and guilt stories from what's actually true in reality, right? What is actually bad, wrong, and shameful about us versus what are just our coping mechanisms, or what did we just learn through caregivers' behavior we're not allowed to do and be, but really it's totally fine that we do and be that, right? Like learning to reject ourselves, learning to shame, blame, and guilt ourselves, all of us now having these parts of ourselves that we scapegoat, and then we say, this is the reason why. Yeah? I am suffering the way that I'm suffering. If I could just get rid of this personality aspect of myself, if I could just fix my body, if I could just be this certain way, if I could just get into this certain career, if I would fix my life. Because again, we learned somewhere along the way that these were the parts of self that were causing us to not have the security and the safety that we needed. We learned to blame, shame, and guilt ourselves when any time we experienced pain. The more we were not able to be validated in our pain and our experience by our caregivers. So when we were experiencing pain, and if our caregivers were able to be like, oh honey, I'm so sorry you're experiencing pain. What's going on? Let's work this out. How am I missing the boat on getting your needs met? If our caregivers were able to validate our emotions, we would have learned that our experience matters, that our emotions matter, and that not everything is our fault. That not everything that we're experiencing is because we're doing something wrong. If, on the other hand, no matter what we did, we weren't able to get our needs met, we would then become the kind of people who are constantly feeling like we have no power in life. It's possible that this is what would happen. That no matter what we do, we may as well just not bother because there was no answer. We tried all these different things. We tried to be what we thought people wanted us to be, but we never got there. And we just kept getting abused or harmed or being put in a situation where we didn't feel good. We would have just given up. So for some of us, we feel like we have no power in life, and we feel like it doesn't matter what we do. Probably, maybe, in some situations, it is because in our childhoods there was literally nothing we could do. For some of us, we learn to be deeply empathic and to completely negate our own experiences and to be very much, I need to lean into the experience of the people around me. I need to be the caregiver for the people around me. I need to be good for the people around me. Because we learned that when we empathized with our caregivers, when we were their counselor, when we were able to be there for them, all of a sudden we were getting love and attention and connection we couldn't get in any other way. So we learned to deny and not feel and not validate our own experience of how our caregivers weren't showing up for us, how we weren't getting our needs met, how we were not being cared for. We learned to invalidate all of that and how to prioritize being the empathizing caregiver, which means we're now in a situation where whenever we feel like we're not getting our needs met, where we don't feel like we're being cared for, when we don't feel good, our instinct is to care for someone else, to take care of someone else, to be codependent with someone else, because we learned that's how we get our needs met. And then we burn ourselves out. We never know how to set boundaries. We're constantly over-empathizing with other people and never validating our own experience. And then we feel like we're not allowed to validate our own experience and like it's a betrayal to be upset about how we didn't get our needs met, or to look at how our caregivers failed us, or to look at how other people might be stepping on our boundaries and doing things that they shouldn't be doing. Because we learned that's not safe. If you're not validating and taking into account and being empathic with everyone else, you're not going to get your needs met, and therefore you're not going to be safe. So we have big resistance to ever validating our own experience or our own feelings, or saying, like, yeah, maybe it wasn't my caregiver's fault that they couldn't care for me, or that I wasn't getting my needs met. But I can't be upset about that. I can't validate my own experience. I can't let myself be sad or upset or validated in that, because that's not safe, right? Some of us, again, learned that people pleasing is the way to go. That anytime we experience something wrong or painful or harmful, the answer is always to look for, what did I just do wrong? How is this my fault? How did I cause it? How is it that I made them act that way? And instead of that actually being an empowering thing, we literally are never able to see that sometimes people are just shitty. That sometimes it's not our fault that someone treats us badly. That sometimes it is someone else doing something shitty. And it had nothing to do with us. It's not our fault. It's not because we're codependent. It's not because we're a doormat. And that's the reason why they're allowed to just walk all over us, or allowed to just do whatever they want. It doesn't validate their experience. It doesn't justify their behavior. But to us, it does. We're like, see, if I was just different, if I was just better, if I was just not a people pleaser, they wouldn't have done that to me. We learn to be people pleaser. We learn to be constantly on the lookout for what does everyone else want from me. And we're never validating our own feelings. We're never validating our own experience. It's all about, am I good to the people around me? And like I say, self-help, self-improvement, and spirituality completely feeds into this. It's the exact childhood coping mechanism of, if I am in pain, the solution is to figure out how it's my fault, what I'm doing wrong, how I'm the cause, so that I can fix or change my own behavior in some way, and therefore find the solution. We see how these patterns come up. We see how these are created. So then we get into our adulthoods. And again, we have all of these parts of self that we hate. We have all of our coping mechanisms. We have all of our ways that we numb and that we scapegoat and that we escape. Because really, at the end of the day, what we have is pain. We have parts of self that have been shamed and cast into the shadow. That's painful. We're living lives where we're trying to figure out what everyone else wants from us, instead of being connected to what we actually care about and what we actually value. We feel like no matter what we do, we're never good enough, because culture is constantly telling us that. And we don't know how to find what is good enough and what would make us okay. And finally, we don't know how to validate our own feelings. We don't know how to validate our own experience. We only know how to numb and suppress and stimulate ourselves so that we don't feel the pain that we're in, or to just look to something to tell us, if you just fix yourself enough, you can get rid of this pain. Because we don't know how to just feel what we're feeling. We don't know how to just validate our own experience. We don't know how to look back and say, wow, okay, I've been through a lot of shitty things. I was rejected. I wasn't cared for. I didn't get my needs met. And maybe it wasn't my caregiver's fault. Maybe it's not that they were trying to harm me. But that doesn't change the fact that I was harmed. And we don't know how to, like I say, not go into spirituality, self-help, personal growth, where we look for the bigger picture, or we empathize with the people who hurt us, or we try and find the bigger spiritual meaning, or we look for how we can fix and change and improve ourselves. We don't know how to put that on hold for a second, so that we can actually feel what we're feeling. So we can validate our own experience and how we perceived it and how it affected us. We all keep trying to skip that step and to go into just, what can I do to fix or change my mind or my behavior to make it so that people and the world will respond to me differently. So this is what I mean when I say sometimes more self-help, spirituality, personal growth work is not what we need. Sometimes what we actually need is to be allowed to be upset that we went through what we went through. Sometimes we need space to feel the pain that we have experienced, and to have that pain validated in a way that's like, it's not because you were shitty. It's not because you aren't enough. It's not because you are shameful or there are bad parts of you or that you caused it. it was because caregivers didn't understand. Caregivers didn't have access. Caregivers did shitty things. Friends did shitty things. Other authority figures, teachers, principals, bosses, made us feel deeply and profoundly insecure and unsafe. And the only thing we knew to do was to blame ourselves. When really, now, we need some time to just be like, no, what they did hurt me. We need space and time to be like, right? Even if somebody accidentally shoots you and they didn't mean to, and it wasn't their fault, that does not then mean that you do not now have a bullet inside of you that needs to be treated. So especially for my empathizers out there, my codependents and my empathizers, the people who are like, yeah, well, my caregivers didn't mean to hurt me. They were doing their best. Okay, that might be true. That's probably true. And it doesn't erase your experience. Just because they were trying their best, and just because they were doing everything that they could have done, doesn't mean that you didn't get harmed. Doesn't mean that you don't need to have some space and time to go through a period of catharsis where you are validated in what you experienced. Just like if someone accidentally shoots you, it doesn't then mean you don't need to be treated. It doesn't then erase the fact that you now have a bullet inside of you and you need to go to the hospital and you need to get the bullet removed and you need to get disinfectant and you need to be treated. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that metaphor make sense? And then, from there, here's the thing. We need to be able to be given space to be validated in our feelings, validated in our perspective, to be given space to feel the pain that we have experienced, and to not spiritualize it, and to not look for what our part in it was, and to not look for all of these things. To start to connect with the parts of ourselves that have been shadowed into shame, blame, and guilt, and be like, okay, if it's not really that I am shameful, that these parts of me are bad, that my coping mechanisms are bad, that my scapegoats are bad, and I need to fix these things. But rather, that these parts of me are good, and they need to be loved and brought into the light. But rather, that my coping, my numbing, my scapegoats, all of my behaviors that I think are the reason that my life sucks, are actually how I am getting my needs for pleasure and escape from pain met right now. We need to go through that period of learning to get out of the shame, blame, and guilt for these parts of ourselves that we hate and the behaviors that we have that we hate. So we can learn what these parts of self actually need, so we can start to express them, so we can grow and mature them, and realize that they hold the answers so much of the time to the life that we want to live. That the reason we don't know what we value and the reason we don't have connection to a life that matters to us is because we don't really know ourselves. Because we've been convinced that so many parts of ourselves are wrong and bad and shameful, when really they are parts of us. They are who we are. And they're not bad, and they're not wrong, and they're not shameful. And we need to learn how to embrace them, bring them into the light, and then they're going to show us how to live a life that matters to us. And then second thing, with our coping, numbing, self-sabotage, all of these habits that we have that we think are bad and wrong, we need some time to be like, okay, how are these things helping me? How are these things helping me escape pain? How are these things the coping mechanisms I developed to try to get my needs met? Right? So you're not a people pleaser because you're just weak and shitty. You're a people pleaser because you learned that no one is going to validate your experience. No one is going to validate your feelings. That the only way to be safe and taken care of is to do what everyone around you wants you to do. Right? It's not that you don't love yourself, that you're a people pleaser. You love yourself a lot. You're trying to keep yourself safe. That's why you're a people pleaser. You blame yourself for everything. Not because you hate yourself, but because you're trying to keep yourself safe. You numb out in front of Netflix because you have feelings. There are things in your life that don't feel good, either in your current reality or from your past reality or both, that you don't know how to process, you don't know how to fix. And you're so exhausted from feeling that feeling that you're just trying to find pleasure in whatever way you can find it. So you escape. You learned to hate, shame, and blame your body or a personality trait or whatever it is, because again, in your mind, that was the reason you weren't being loved. So now every time you don't feel good, and every time you don't feel safe, and every time you don't feel like you're being cared for, you automatically default to, how do I fix this part of myself? Because this is the part that's wrong. And if we don't go through this period of validation, of exploring our pain, of witnessing our pain, it's like we are in a canoe that's constantly filling with water. And we are convinced that it's because the sides are not tall enough. So we keep building up the sides with our spirituality, personal growth, and self-help. We keep taking responsibility for ourselves. We keep trying to change our thoughts. We keep trying to be more positive. We keep trying to manifest. We keep trying to change our vibration because we think that's the problem. But the canoe just keeps filling up with water because the reality is there's a hole in the bottom. But we don't see that because we're convinced it's me and my behavior. And this is the thing that's wrong with me. Because we've never taken the time to validate our experience, to feel our actual feelings, to be in that state of victim mentality where we are just upset for ourselves, to feel the like, okay, this is how I experienced what I experienced, and it hurt for this reason. And I learned to hate this about myself, and I went through all these horrible things. And we have to go through that period that is messy and uncomfortable and doesn't feel good and goes against everything we learned, right? Especially if you're a people pleaser. It goes against the whole, I'm going to be safe if I just fix myself. So this is why this is such hard work to do. This is why, again, the mystery school is 5 years. Because learning to actually validate our own experience and not blame ourselves or assume that we're wrong and bad or go into our scapegoats or whatever it is so difficult. And most of the time we don't even see that we're in self-blame, shame, and guilt. Because it's so normal and so natural. And then again, self-help, spirituality, and personal growth says that's just what taking responsibility is, right? And we're afraid that if we're not taking responsibility, that we're not going to be safe. If we just let ourselves feel our feelings and be upset, it kind of can feel like we're giving our power away. But I want to promise you that in real reality, when we give ourselves that time and that space to validate our own experience, to validate our feelings, to make ourselves safe, that it wasn't all our fault, that not everything was because of us, that we are not bad, wrong, and shameful, that all of our behaviors are our way of trying to make ourselves safe and feel good. We actually can start to investigate where we do have control, where we are playing a role, and where our true power is. So it's like stopping building the sides of that canoe, taking a break, and being able to be like, maybe I'm wrong about the cause of my pain. Maybe it's not that I am shitty and I just need to fix myself, or I'm not spiritual enough, or I'm not manifesting enough. Maybe there's actual complexity to this. And then we can identify, oh, there's a hole in the canoe. That's the actual problem. And then you can fill the hole. So then we can have our spirituality, self-help, and personal growth come in. Then we can take responsibility for the things that are actually our responsibility. We can find where we actually have power, instead of wasting our time continuing to try to fix and change ourselves where we are not the problem, or fix and change the parts of ourselves that aren't the problem. So it's not that taking a break from spirituality, self-help, and personal growth means that we just say, well, right, I was harmed in my childhood and therefore there's nothing I can do. Rather, we're giving ourselves space and time to figure out what's actually going on. The actual reason we are feeling how we're feeling. The real situation that's happening. And then we can take our power where it actually exists. And this is going to mean, in some circumstances, that we're going to realize that we don't have complete control. That not all of our pain is something we can spiritualize or self-help or personal growth away. Right? Some of us live in bodies that are chronically ill that are never going to not be chronically ill. So does that mean we have no power? No. Most of us can do some things to make ourselves feel better. But sometimes we just need to be able to be upset and sad and disappointed and exhausted. And that's what we need right now. We don't need more spirituality. We don't need more platitudes. We don't need more. We just need to cry and be upset, and then we will move on. Sometimes we live in a situation where, in order to make ends meet, we have to work harder than is actually good for us. And we don't need more spirituality and personal growth and people telling us to just try harder and be positive and whatever. We just need to be validated that that sucks. Because again, sometimes the real answer is not change yourself. Sometimes the real solution is going to be, I need to say no to people. Sometimes the real solution is, I need to quit this job. Sometimes the real solution is, this isn't about me adjusting myself. I need to leave the relationship. I need to say no. I need something to change in the way things are. Maybe we become people who start to see systems and say, whoa, okay, it's the system that needs to change. It's not that we are all just failing and being shitty and having, overwhelm and not having nervous system regulation because we're all just not doing enough breathing exercises. But maybe it's because culture is demanding too much of us. And we need to be the kind of people who demand a new culture. So instead of building up the walls with all of our self-help and self-improvement, we become the kind of people who say, no, I'm going to plug the hole in the canoe. I'm going to demand something different of culture. I'm going to stop participating in things I don't need to participate in. Do you see what I'm saying here? Sometimes it's not about fixing yourself. Sometimes it's not that you are the problem. Sometimes what you need is validation, love, a safe space to express your emotions. And then you can figure out what is actually your power, what you need, what's good for you, what's hurting you, and that you don't have complete control over life, and that not everything is within your power to change, and that it's okay to sometimes have negative emotions. It's okay that we have patterns that we haven't been able to shift. It's okay that we're still traumatized from certain things and that it causes us to behave in certain ways. That we're not failing if we don't have a perfect, transcended experience. And rather than making that a bad, shameful, wrong, bad thing, we can learn to just love and accept and embrace ourselves in those moments where life is hard and we just need love and validation and compassion. Again, we just don't need more spirituality, more self-help, more personal growth. And again, sometimes, right, we just need to go outside. Sometimes we just need to hang out with people. Sometimes we just need the simple things in life that health, spirituality, wellness, and whatever are overcomplicating. We just need a hobby we're not trying to monetize. We just need connection. We just need a break. And that's really real too. That we're not supposed to be in a constant state of navel gazing and analyzing and fixing and improving. That sometimes the last thing we need is spirituality, self-help, and personal growth. And the thing we really need is just to connect to our humanity. To validate our feelings, to validate our experience, to give ourselves compassion, and to do just some normal human stuff. Go outside, hang out with friends, read a book, play a video game. Just be in your life, be in your experience, and don't make everything about improving and changing all the time. Okay? So there are times and places where the last thing we need is more spirituality, self-help, and personal growth. And the real answer is connecting to our humanity through compassion and curiosity around what we're actually feeling and what we actually need. And it's not about fixing or changing or improving ourselves or expecting ourselves to have a life where we're completely transcended all the time. But rather, again, it's about finding tools to help us navigate the things we can control and the things that we can't, and not blaming ourselves for everything. Okay? So hopefully that was helpful. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have video suggestions. Come join the mystery school. And until next week, I will see you later. Thanks for being here.